You know, there isn't a broadcaster in this country who wasn't familiar or isn't familiar with what I'm doing. Right. I'm probably the most prominent broadcaster in the world, and every one of them, everybody you hear on radio, television, people in broadcasting, they study this show like it's the Torah. It was really groundbreaking in that it was taboo to talk about sex on terrestrial radio. And we talked about a lot of things, not just sex. We talked about issues that people don't talk about. We talked about racism. We talked about sexuality. We talked about how guys talk about sex, how women talk about sex. And as far as my audience being immature and all that kind of stuff, which he called the audience, take a look at who our audience is. The demographics don't lie, and the Scarborough Report never lied. Who was listening to us on terrestrial radio? We have the wealthiest, the intelligent, college-educated audience that I think has ever been collected in the United States.
Howard Stern was born on January 12, 1954, to Ben and Ray Stern in Queens, New York. Howard's father was a radio engineer, so ever since he was a kid, he was interested in the field of radio.
Yeah. This was my plan since I was 5 years old. I wanted to hear like a real type of radio. Everybody was milquetoast. Everybody was middle of the road. Everybody didn't want to offend everybody else. And it was boring. It was dull.
And you knew you wanted to do this when you were 5?
I wanted to be on the radio and just do a stream of consciousness radio show. And whenever I feel I'm censoring myself, whenever I feel I'm hiding something from the audience, I go ahead and blurt it out.
His family moved to Roosevelt, New York, where he attended Roosevelt High School.
So uptight about race. I grew up in a black neighborhood. Everybody talked about race. 24 hours a day, what you heard on Black Jeopardy was going on in the school.
After high school, Howard attended Boston University, where he majored in communications. Howard went all around the East Coast doing radio shows with the goal of someday making it to New York. Howard made it to New York in 1982 with the company WNBC. Once Howard got to NBC, he was constantly harassed by his management. It was Kevin Metheny, or Pig Virus's job, as Howard calls him on the air, to moderate the show and try to get Howard fired. He did this by having many redundant meanings about his behavior on the air and even reading the call letters right.
The way it's said properly is WNBC. This is key. Come on.
WNBC.
No. Gotta be more like this. Listen up. WNBC. You hear that? Kind of left. The NBC.
WNBC. WNBC.
Wider.
WNBC.
One more.
In my mind, I'm hearing. It sounds like I'm saying exactly what you're saying.
No.
Howard was never afraid of telling his opinions about NBC, even when he was working for them.
I admire you and the work you do and the fine station you work for. Don't you think it's one of the great radio stations in America?
No. I think this is I think the station I work for it's a station that's dying, and that's why they hired me to be so offensive.
No. Oh, Howard.
No, it's true. As the whole station is a scam.
In July of 1985, Howard Stern became the #1 disc jockey in all of New York. Although he was #1, he was not exempt from people trying to take him off the air.
Hispanic and black groups want Stern censured because he's racist. Other groups say he should be taken off the air because he violates community standards.
Don't bust my...
Lots of people would agree with that description. Howard Stern has become one of the most vilified people in America. Yet he's also hugely successful. His radio programs listened to by almost 5 million people, and his success is changing people's idea about what can be said or done in popular media.
In September of 1985, NBC fired Howard Stern due to conceptual differences. Howard decided to stay in New York and beat NBC in ratings with his new station, WXRK. Stern was well known by everyone in the New York area, but it wasn't until this 1992 MTV performance that he became a name known nationwide.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bartman!
With WXRK, Howard had more freedom and was able to syndicate his show in over 60 cities around the country. The Howard Stern Show was the first syndicated show ever. It became #1 in many regions. In 1994, Howard explored the deeper parts of his life, publishing his first autobiography. This book was filled with stories, experiences, and his personal life, making it well fit that he named it Private Parts.
He wrote an autobiography that became an enormous bestseller. At book signings, he got the biggest crowds in publishing history. These pictures are from Los Angeles, but this happened all over. Mobs of people would wait for hours screaming, "Howard!"
There's approximately 3,000 to 4,000 people online already.
Howard Stern, the greatest of all time. Howard is the greatest.
He's the sanest, most intelligent humorist in America.
It's good, clean American literature.
Howard Stern's Private Parts was such a commercial and critical success that he made a follow-up book in 1995 called Miss America, and yet again reached #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list. In 1994, Howard Stern announced that he was running for governor of New York for the Libertarian Party. His stance was to reinstate the death penalty, eliminate all highway tolls, and make all road work at night, and then resign. He even made a commercial.
Let's see what people think about Howard Stern for governor.
I think he's disgusting as a human being. I think he's a disgusting, poor excuse for a man.
I'm not voting for him. Howard Stern is a nut. He'll never get my vote.
Well, really, I ain't into Howard Stern, really. Well, right now, no comment. I couldn't get any comment on that.
Even though he had a large majority of the votes, he resigned his campaign due to the state of New York asking him to release his finances. In 1997, Howard made and starred in his first ever movie. This was based on his first book. He starred among his radio crew, Paul Giamatti, and multiple celebrity cameos. His movie premiered at Madison Square Garden, which was one of the biggest premieres in history. Howard arrived in a Popemobile-type vehicle in which people shouted his name as he got out. In the late 90s and early 2000s, the Federal Communications Commission waged war against Howard Stern. The FCC really cracked down on Howard following the events at the 2004 Super Bowl halftime show where Janet Jackson's nipple was exposed. Although this incident and Howard have no relation, the FCC used it as an excuse to fine Howard more money, and eventually getting him fired from his job using extortion. They fined him for almost everything he said. This is not an issue of whether or not you like Howard, but whether or not you support this freedom of speech. The total amount they fined him was about $2.5 million. After Howard left radio, no one was ever fined since by the FCC to this day, proving it was a personal attack against Howard. Howard couldn't take the restrictions and censorship of terrestrial radio anymore, so in 2005 he made a bold move. He made a leap into a new platform, satellite radio. It was here where the FCC can't touch him, and he could say and do whatever he wants. It was surprising that Howard picked Sirius as a platform rather than XM, because XM was the leading company back in 2005. Just a few years after Howard signed with Sirius, Sirius became bigger than XM, and they bought XM out, making SiriusXm. Before Howard, Sirius had 600,000 subscribers. The day of Howard's first show, 80,000 more people bought receivers, and the number's been drastically going up since. In 2012, Howard did something that no one predicted. He went to work on a family talent show on NBC, America's Got Talent. Here, Howard could do what he does best, judge other people. While on AGT, Howard tried to be as brutally honest as possible.
Has someone in your life said to you, you know, maybe this isn't for you? Has a parent...
No, my parents are dead.
And they died of embarrassment?
No.
No, okay.
In 2015, Howard resigned from America's Got Talent to make more time for his radio show. He currently, to this day, has more than 30 million subscribers. That's more than Netflix, HBO, and Showtime combined. The Howard Stern Show was revolutionary. It was the first free-form show. He invented the concept and the idea of reality broadcasting. I mean, what other show talks to the producer during the broadcast? They were also the first show to take normal people from the street, bring them up to the studio, and interview them. And finally, the word that every Stern Show fan knows. A word that grew out of the show and made itself into pop culture. The word that producer Gary Delabate mispronounced 20 years ago by mispronouncing Baba Louie into Baba Booey. You might be asking, so what, who cares about Howard Stern? Well, if this guy gets selected, he's gonna be our next Supreme Court Justice.
We've just come off the toughest hole on the golf course, the 17th. Oh, quiet, please.
From California this morning.
I think the CEO of Bank of America should be Howard Stern and Baba Booey.
Okay, we'll stop you there.
It's like Baba Booey, Baba Booey, Baba Booey. Code for something's wrong, Andrew Schuster says.
Tracy Wilson, and I'm joined by Olympic champ Peggy Fleming.
Baba Booey, Howard Stern's penis, Baba Booey, Baba Booey. Baba